Hey, Carter.
Hey, Mustafa, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
Do you want me to?
Yep.
I'm a co-host. Exciting. All right. So, of the attendees, oh, I should promote to panelist. Okay, so I just promoted. Oh, I have to pull up that email. Where was that email? Oh, here we go. Okay, cool. Christine is promoted to is a panelist, so she can present.
Great.
Yep. Hey, Anita.
Will I be sharing my screen, or do you put that up? Because I can share my presentation.
Yes, when we're ready to do that.
Okay. Thank you for sneaking us in here, by the way. I know it was last minute. We appreciate that.
Christina, it's Chenault Smith, the chair of the committee. I want to thank you for the rearranging of the schedule.
Oh, no problem. I didn't know you were speaking with me.
Okay. We try to go from the least time consuming to the most time consuming. We have one brief thing before the presentation of a letter
Sure.
which will approve. That's usually pro forma.
Okay. Yeah, we were ready for 6:30 anyway, so there's no problem.
Okay.
No problem at all.
One, two. We'll wait just one moment in case any other committee members are on the way.
Christine, hi. You can actually start, I think you can start sharing your screen. You want to just try doing that?
It's telling me I can't screen share while the other participant is sharing.
Okay.
Notice that.
I think, oh, so yeah, once Carter.
It's a notice about the meeting.
Yeah, once Carter stops, then you'll be able to.
Sounds good.
Carter, as soon as you're ready, can begin.
Good. Here's the agenda. I think you're going to be doing the letter first, correct?
Yeah.
Oh.
Or the,
Or
Chenault, do you want to,
It's on in your recording.
Mhm.
Okay. This is the CB2 Manhattan Landmarks Committee meeting for December 14th by video conference. I'm Chenault Spence, the chair of the committee. A few things just to begin by way of announcements. On Monday coming, the meeting of the month for Landmarks Committee, and that will start at 7:30 rather than 6:30 as previously announced. One technical note, please mute yourself whenever you're not talking. Sometimes background noise takes over the screen and we find that it's difficult. We're going to reverse the order tonight of the considerations of one is consideration of a letter, the other two are applications. We'll begin with 50 West 13th Street. Village Preservation has asked us to support a letter that they have sent to the Landmarks Commission requesting an individual landmark designation for this building. It's an important off-Broadway theater and has been a number of years. Sarah Altman from Village Preservation will say a few words about it. Sarah, are you there? Sarah seems not to be on
No,
yet.
here we go. Here we go. I got it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Mustafa,
Okay, thank
Mustafa
you.
like got me right in there, man. It was right in.
Okay.
Yes, as Chenault indicated, we are looking to have this 1840s structure in the south of Union Square individually landmarked. It's a beautifully intact Greek Revival row house from the 1840s, as I said. But its true significance lies in its cultural resource as, you know, a centerpiece for the off-Broadway movement. In 1972, the 13th Street Repertory Company was founded here by Edith O'Hara, who was open to letting people try different both actors and writers try different things here, which is part and parcel of that off-Broadway movement. I think the most interesting thing was Tennessee Williams, whom she supported and his works, and he talked about it as it was theaters like this that really epitomized theater going forward. You all have the letter that we wrote with all of the history in it. We think that this is an incredible cultural resource, and we'd like to see that continue going forward as it being preserved. Short and sweet.
Okay. Do any committee members have anything to say about this? Are there any members of the? Okay, thank you, Sarah. We'll make the formal resolution
Thank
in
you.
the business session. The first application is for 49 Grove Street to restore the facade. And Christine, I believe you can share your screen now. If not, someone will arrange that.
Okay, sure. Let me do that. Are we able to? Is it viewable? for everybody?
Okay.
Good.
I have black squares that are moving along it.
Hey, Christine, I think there's like a black rectangle that's sort of on the top left of your screen.
Can I get rid of it?
Yeah, I think you got rid of it. So
Okay,
thank you.
no problem. All right, so I'll get started here. Introduce myself. So I'm Christine Loach from EDG. I'm the applicant of record for this LPC filing. The building is 49 Grove Street, and this is for a facade restoration. The building is located in the Greenwich Village Historic District. Here's a map to show everybody. Let's just give you a little background on why we're needing this permit review with the commission at Landmarks. We actually currently have an active LPC permit for restoration of the 2 street facades along Bleecker and Grove Street from the ground floor to the 6th floor level right below the parapet. We are actively performing work currently under that permit. And during the course of that construction, we have observed more issues than anticipated and structural deficiencies, which have called for a PAA for this application. Landmarks has actually gotten their engineer and retainer involved, and they're reviewing very detailed condition assessment reports from our firm on these deficiencies and structural issues. So they'll be weighing in and also giving that feedback to the community board to help in your decision. So I was told that feedback should be provided by the end of this week. Another just little background to give you in this photo on the right-hand side, we also have an active permit to replace 100% of the street elevation parapets. In that scope included is brick removal and replacement. We were able to salvage most of the decorative cast stone, those nice arches you see in the photos, and bandwork, but we did get approval to replace 100% of the bluestone lintels, these members above the window, and we're replacing those to match in kind, but with precast. So these are the 2 street facades that our permit includes. We'll get a little bit more into our scope further along in these slides. So now we're just going to go through just a couple typical existing conditions. So here on the left, there's facade movement that we're seeing. And you can see that in this joint in the masonry piers. On the right-hand side in this photo, you can see the brick deterioration, some improper prior work that was performed in patching. Here's some close-ups of the brick. I know we try to salvage as much as possible during work on Landmarks properties, but this brick is beyond saving. It's crazed, it's bald. It doesn't properly mitigate water from penetrating the facade. So we are requesting that this brick be replaced, and we'll have Landmarks overseeing our replacement materials. Some more photos of existing conditions. On the left-hand side, it's a piece of cast stone. We're able to salvage a lot of these pieces. We'll pin them from the backside and do minor patching on the front side of the stone and reset them. So in this project, we were able to basically schedule to keep most of the cast stone features as original, with some minor replacements in precast. This is a typical condition of the bluestone deterioration that we're finding. In our application, we have a lot of bluestone replacements scheduled. At the second and fourth floor, it's all of the bluestone at those elevations. We're scoped to replace square bluestone units. So these sill units and the water tables will be replaced in kind bluestone. Decorative elements we've requested be replaced in precast, which will match an existing color, texture, and profile. Just going a little bit into some photos of the structural deficiencies I noted. The right-hand side photo is brick being removed by hand. We're seeing mortar cohesion loss pretty much globally throughout the facade. The left-hand side photo is showing that there's no masonry ties from the exterior facade to the masonry backup. These are underlying conditions of the backup brick. We're concerned if we don't replace all the brick, how will we get the building watertight? So during our work, we'll be waterproofing this backup, filling the void solid. And that way we prevent water infiltration into the building interior. We did expose during demolition a large quantity of voids from existing chimney flues that are abandoned now. They're very deteriorated and are contributing to our issue of structural deficiencies with the facade. Some photos of demolition conditions in progress. So we do have an approved permit and have performed a large quantity of demolition. We're trying to push our permits along quickly as to not leave conditions in this manner. We have a lot of shoring and open areas. So Landmarks is working with us to push this application along. The next couple of photos are sample approvals we've already received with Landmarks. So these photos are a brick of mortar that Landmarks has worked with us to review and approve. These are sample approvals for bluestone replacement and cast stone. These photos are a typical example of our reconstruction in progress. So we are, when we rebuild, completely matching the existing structure. We're not asking to alter any of the existing design. So all the decorative features will either be salvaged or replaced to aesthetically look the same. Old undulations, we are repeating those when we rebuild. It's just some examples of existing conditions to remain. So showing that cast stone, highly decorative, that we're able to salvage most of, which is great. And these are just schematics of what the extent of the brick replacement will be. Our worst case scenario is that it's 100% of the brickwork. And we feel that's a high possibility from what we've found so far. And this schematic view is our cast stone and bluestone replacements. It's noted in gray. So the orange is our brick replacement, gray is our stone replacements. So it is a large quantity as noted for the bluestone at the second and fourth floor. And then we have bluestone bands at each floor and just minor cast stone replacements. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you. I have a couple questions for the notes here.
Sure.
Is it, am I correct that in general, the brick is not salvageable, the bluestone is least salvageable, and the cast stone parts are salvageable, parts are not?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
I would lump the brick and bluestone in the same category of non-salvageable. The majority of what we're seeing. But
Okay,
cast
that's fine.
stone, most we're able to keep.
I wrote it as likely depending on the investigation.
Great.
Are there members of the committee with questions?
Hello, this is Brian, and I was wondering about the parapet being replaced, I think you said. And are these images that you are sharing with us right now, is that the type of parapet design that you're going to replace? In other words, something more or less contemporary rather than historic?
The parapet replacement will look exactly as existing did, the historic. We're replacing all the stone back. We're building it to the same height. It has the same coping. It will be the same. We're not changing any of the features of the parapet.
Is there a image of that?
It's
New-
currently in process of being rebuilt. We don't have the exterior elements installed yet. It's in progress.
Is there an image of the parapet as it will look when it's finished?
So this picture on the right, that's the existing parapet. When we rebuild back, it's going to look the same, but with some newer materials. But all the features, so the lintel pieces will be those samples I showed, that same color, the textures, the profiles. Most of this cast stone, we're removing and resetting and repairing it before resetting if needed. And the brick, it won't be the existing brick, but we're replacing with the brick approval we've received from Landmarks.
Thank you.
Are there further questions from the committee?
I have a question. Could you explain to us what made this brick so fragile? Was it the way in which it was installed, or was it the makeup of the actual material?
There's multiple factors, and this is what we've presented to Landmarks liaison for the structural review. Part of it is that this building's, I think, 102 plus years old. So there is a useful life of natural materials. So that's part of brick deterioration. The glazing fails over time. That's why we see the popping face of the brick, the crazing. The underlying conditions, this type of installation of the brick, it's called running bond. It doesn't have a header. I know it kind of gets technical, but there's nothing tying the brick to
I
the
can
back.
handle it.
Yeah.
I understand. I'm
Okay,
more
great.
interested in why the crazing, but I guess it's the glaze that made it, because we have 200-year-old brick and they're fine. The mortar just needs replacing, but it's really because of the type of firing, I guess.
Yeah, definitely varying types of brick will age different. So there are bricks that'll last longer than others. Freeze thaw,
Okay.
obviously over time deteriorates. So,
I'm just wondering if we're going to have a slew of these, because this is a very common type of building in our neighborhood. So
We'll hear those when they come to us.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, are there other members of the committee with questions? Are there members of the public with questions? If so, raise your hand. Okay, thank you very much. This building's a near neighbor of mine, so I pass it almost every day. I look forward to its restoration.
oh, great. Thank you. Thank you for having us and hearing our claim. As noted, Landmarks will reach out to you. They'll help in giving you information and passing on their engineer's recommendations. So we look forward to your conclusions.
And our recommendation will go to the board on next Thursday and then be passed along to the Landmarks ahead of your hearing there.
Great. Thank
Okay,
you very much.
thank you.
Thank you.
The next application is for 27 East 4th Street to demolish an existing one-story garage and construct a new building. We heard this application or version of it in 2012 and will be particularly interested to know where, as you go through the entire presentation, the differences previously. Thank you.
Can I start up?
Yeah,
We're ready,
Joe,
whoever's going to speak
Yep.
first.
Joe is sharing his screen, so you'll just have to tell him how to shuffle through the slides, okay?
Yes, I will.
Yep, sounds good.
Good evening, committee members and chair. We are here to present a new building project proposed for 27 East 4th Street. The site is in the NoHo Historic District Extension and requires approval at the Landmarks Preservation Commission. My name is George Schieferdecker. I am with BKSK Architects. I have Joe Vivino from our firm handling the graphics. And I have Joe Mugford from GMS Engineers here as well to address any structural concerns relative to the construction impact of our project on our neighbor, the Merchants House Museum, which, as we all know, is an important individual landmark. A building for this site was proposed earlier by the owner, as indicated by the chair. The design was for a hotel and required a bulk variance in order to incorporate a street wall at 8 stories with no setback. The design received approval from the Landmarks Preservation Commission and the City Planning Commission, but was turned down at the City Council. We are returning now with a proposed design for a 7-story commercial building, 6 stories with a setback 7th story, which is in full conformance with the New York City zoning. Next. A 1-story garage building currently occupies the site. It was constructed in 1945 and it replaced a 4.5-story townhouse. The garage building was described in the previous LPC approval as, quote, not representative of the buildings for which the historic district was designated, and therefore its demolition was approved. We are similarly proposing its demolition as part of our project. Next. The site is located on East 4th Street between the Merchants House Museum to the west and a classic 9-story loft building to the east. At the rear of the site is an historic alley that is not a public way. On the left are views of the site from the east top and from the west bottom. We are obscured by the tree, unfortunately. It has not yet lost its leaves, so we can't get the proper picture. On the right are views of the rear of the site and down the leg of the alley that extends to the Bowery. Next. The following images remind us of what was on our site prior to the 1-story garage building. Up until the early 1940s, the site was occupied by a 4-story townhouse. These images serve as a reminder of the residential character of the neighborhood in its earliest days. That character was slowly supplanted by the taller industrial loft buildings so typical of the NoHo Historic District. It is useful to note also the stepping up in scale from the Merchants House that even this earlier 4-story townhouse embodied. Our proposed design works to recollect this residential history, the stepping up in street wall scale, and the loft building character of the district in a contemporary aesthetic, as I hope to demonstrate. Next. This sheet shows the previous proposal on the left and our current proposal in the center with a section through it on the right. The primary difference between our current proposal and the previous design, other than its obvious materiality and facade design, is the number of stories and its single floor setback. As of right zoning mandates a setback after a certain maximum height or number of stories, whichever is less. The setback provides a lower street wall presence and, as I mentioned, hints at the historic stepping up of the building massing from the Merchants House to our building and to our other neighbor, the 9-story industrial loft building at 25 East 4th. On the street, we are approximately 11 feet lower than the previous scheme. The setback is 20 feet. Next. Go ahead.
So what is the difference in height between the Merchants House and your building and your building?
The difference in the overall height of the buildings is negligible. It's about the same. The difference is really almost entirely on the street wall. And where it is, we are at, let me see, I think we're at, get it here. We're at 84 feet to the cornice. and whereas the previous scheme was about 95 feet to its cornice. 90.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Next, Joe. So these images are displayed to show the setback portion of our building and to make clear the fact that current zoning, which obviously dictates building massing in our time, is already in evidence on East 4th Street with the new corner building at the end of our block. Historically, buildings in the district were continuous on their street wall for their full height, and the previous proposal had sought to preserve that character through a variance. We are limiting our building to a single setback floor to allow the street wall presence of the building to clearly dominate over the setback portion and acknowledge the historic character of street walls in the district as much as possible. As a result of the single setback, our proposed design is 1 story less than the previous proposal, but it is deeper on the site to utilize the full floor area ratio. Next. Our proposal is well within the scale of the block. Our block is marked by a diverse scale, from the lower townhouse scale to the ample scale of industrial loft style buildings and the very unique commercial buildings of Lafayette Street. With a reduced street wall presence, our proposal falls in the middle ground between the scale of our 2 neighbors. Our proposal obviously shown in that top image in the red. Next. This same diversity of scale plays out on the other side of East 4th Street, with townhouses to the east and the substantial Silk building a block over to the west. Our proposed scale again is superimposed on the profile of the other side of the street. Next. The elements of our proposed design are drawn from the character of the NoHo historic districts and the historic districts in close proximity to the site. Materiality first on the left. Terracotta is a material that has a long history in this area and indeed in the city, and has been quote unquote rediscovered and transformed in our time as contemporary architecture has found new and innovative uses and constructions for it. Moving left to right are Louis Sullivan's Bayard Condeck building, which remains an enduring touchstone for us in its use of terracotta ornament. The Little Singer building next over, with its use of terracotta and in a metal armature that presages the current terracotta rain screen technologies, and our own 529 Broadway, previously approved by the commission, that exploits current technologies for the fabrication of terracotta to create a contemporary quote unquote ornateness as it travels across the building. Coloration, the last 2 images on the right. The use of molded brick with its enduring character up against materials with a similar coloration is also a theme seen often in the district. The Davini Press building on the corner of East 4th and Lafayette has a red clay decorative terracotta screen at its entrance, surrounded by molded red brick. And the classic use of a richly toned molded brick on the Merchant's House is also an important reference. Next. So our proposed design uses these elements in a contemporary expression. It is important to note that while some of our cited examples are very distinctive buildings, we have tried to be simple, subtle, straightforward with our contemporary expression. We think it is important that we don't, quote unquote, compete with the Merchant's House, and that we recognize its importance to the district, but also that we remain clear about the architecture of our building as, quote unquote, of our time. With that in mind, our design proposes an aesthetic of a basic brick facade with punched openings and a language of terracotta screen elements and metal trim. The brick of the facade of the face of the building is a molded brick contrasted to a lot line brick, also molded, that is more monochromatic and plain. This is a subtle inversion of a traditional use of brick, where the more modeled and utilitarian brick was often used on the lot line, and then more polished and uniform brick on the face. The terracotta screen elements, or baguettes, within metal framing construction sit in front of a triple hung windows that extend down to the floor of each story. The terracotta screen elements are also used to make a pronounced cornice and a facade for the setback top floor. The terracotta pieces are custom glazed with a modeled pattern. The coloration of the brick and the terracotta are similar, but they are differentiated one from the other by the quality of the 2 materials, as per some of the historic examples that we cited. A charcoal colored metal is used as the armature for the terracotta screen elements, as well as full pilasters and cornice type trim. A gray granite is used at the base where the most durable of materials is called for. Next. Moving from the bottom of the building up, the scale of the base is in keeping with the commercial building of the district, with a floor-to-floor height of 16 feet 5 inches and a 12-foot high storefront. Jet mist granite is used at the base for the brick at the sides and the metal pilasters. Metal fins form the sides of the inset metal pilasters and an inset metal signage band at the 12-foot height. The terracotta screen elements sit in front of the metal trim initially, as we're moving up from the base, then in front of the windows of the second floor, and a horizontal metal cornice element defines the transition and the top of the storefront. The entrance for the upper floors is the second bay from the left. The furthest left window is milk glass, obscuring the fire stair behind it. The middle right bay is the entrance to the commercial lower ground floor. And the furthest right is also part of the commercial space on the ground floor. Next. The middle floors have tall triple hung windows with the lowest pane fixed up to a sill height. The terracotta screen sits in front of the window to that sill height and in front of the metal pilasters between the windows at the sides. The section on the right is a depiction of that screen in front of the fixed pane lower portion of each window on each floor. The terracotta screen elements are deliberately patterned at different angles and arranged in a different order from section to section and top to bottom. This creates a certain dynamism, we feel, and uniqueness to their presence. The depth of the facade to the windows is 1 foot to recall the deeply recessed facades of the district, and the middle pilaster is devoid of the terracotta screen above the sill. Next. The organization of the facade elements and their proportions are meant to serve a functional purpose and to recall the history of the site. The functional purpose of having a center pilaster and a 4-window reading is to allow a possible future division on the interior into 2 spaces. That organization is not atypical in the district, as shown in the examples at the right on Great Jones Street. Generally, windows in the buildings representative of the district character are grouped into a continuous horizontal reading side to side, whether an odd or even number of bays. And the history of the site is subtly recalled in the window proportions that play over the facade. With the terracotta screens overlapping the windows and the substantial dimensions between the windows, we recall a residential window proportion, the ghost of the townhouse that used to occupy the site. With the overall size of the windows in behind the screens and the continuity side to side, we allude to the window proportions for the industrial loft buildings, with which we probably share more of a kinship. Next. Next, Joe. Yeah, there we go. Thanks. At the top of our proposed design, the terracotta screen becomes a cornice element. Louis Sullivan's Bayard Conduct building does this to great effect, and we are using that precedent with all due humility as a prototype for our very simple expression of turning our terracotta screen out onto the cornice and making it into a reading of cornice from the street. On the facade of the setback floor, we use the terracotta screening to link it to the facade expression of the rest of the building and provide an intriguing backdrop to the occupiable terrace. The facade brick is toothed into the lot line brick at the exposed corner of our building, and the metal trim of the cornice at the corner takes the same dimension at the top. Next. The rear of our building is a utilitarian expression utilizing the lot line brick and the metal trim with a reduced depth to the facade elements. The triple hung windows will have a translucent fixed pane to sill level. Please keep in mind that the rear facade is only open to a private alley. On the left is the previous design. At the top right are the materials of the bulkheads and mechanical screening. They are standard metal siding with vertical reveals and metal screening, both in a charcoal gray tone. They're barely visible from the street, and we'll show those views in a second. Next. Here again, the view of our proposed design from the street, east and west, shows the stepping massing from the merchant's house to our proposed design and to our neighbor 25 East 4th. Next. The previous proposal for the site on the left and the current proposal is on the right. Our design is a single story less in height and setback at the top floor. It is deeper on the site to utilize the full floor area ratio available to us. Did we show the chimneys there, Joe?
On the right-hand side here, yeah.
Oh yeah, could you point them out to people? Also, it is noted that the merchant's house has operable chimneys and that those chimneys need to be carried up to the height of our building. We are taking the flues into our building and running them up to preserve the existing roofscape and chimneyscape of the merchant's house up against our lot line. Next. The previous proposal for this site involved a great deal of examination and discussion of the structure of our building and the supportive excavation designed for its cellar and foundation as regards the impact on the merchant's house, or the potential impact on the merchant's house. That design was thoroughly vetted at the time. That design remains exactly the same for this proposal adjacent to the merchant's house and its garden wall. I have with me Joe Mugford of Gilsons, Murray and Stefik, GMS, the structural engineer for the original design and this proposed design, who can explain the structural design, the supportive excavation, and the monitoring in greater detail. If I could, I'd like to turn it over to him.
Everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. So the the goal of the structural design, both in the permanent condition and during construction, is to minimize the effect of both on the adjacent merchant house building. We're doing this in several ways. Part of the construction would involve maintaining the existing structure in place while the foundations are constructed, introducing bracing of the merchant house during construction, and stepping our foundation and excavation in such a way that we're outside of the influence line of the merchant house's foundations. We're also using a mat construction, with the purpose being to minimize the settlement and more evenly distribute the permanent foundation loads of the new building to the soil. And that our anticipated mat settlement for the permanent condition is approaching 1/8 of an inch, significantly less than the current LPC limit of 1/4 of an inch. In the permanent condition, it should also be noted that the new building will provide shielding and bracing of the merchant house from the elements. Next slide. This is a section through the construction. You can see the green indicate the existing masonry walls that will remain in place, both during construction and in the permanent condition. On the top, you can see the existing roof structure as labeled, which will remain in place until the foundations, the first floor and the second floor of the new structure are in place and can laterally stabilize the masonry walls that are going to remain. The blue at the bottom is indicating our stepped mat foundation. And you can see the stepping of that mat adjacent to the merchant house foundation and our existing foundation wall, with the intent of minimizing the effects of potential settlement on the merchant house party line wall as a result of our construction. Next slide. This is a plan showing the supportive excavation. We will follow a controlled sequence that maintains the lateral bracing of the merchant house and our foundation walls. Again, the shelved adjacent excavation to minimize the effects directly adjacent to the merchant house with a deeper foundation beyond. And then the red lines indicating our cross lot bracing that will be used to prevent any lateral movement of the existing lot line walls. Next slide. This is the section showing where the bracing would be installed. This would occur prior to any excavation proceeding below the existing foundations. Next slide. So it should also be noted that we are going to follow the TPPN 1088 criteria for monitoring of the construction and excavation. That will be achieved with displacement monitoring, which will be survey measurements 2 times a week. And that will have, in our case, continuous automatic survey during demolition and excavation with a total station. So we'll be more stringent in the reporting of our movements, if any. We'll also have crack monitoring in place, and also introducing what's called tilt monitoring, which would indicate any lateral leaning or swaying of any of our lot line walls. And that is not something that's required by the TPPN currently. In addition, we'll have vibration monitoring. We will introduce a second threshold of 0.2 inches per second below the 0.5 inches per second required by the technical policy and procedure note. That will allow us to have a pulse or a sense on the magnitudes of vibrations that are occurring on the site, with the intention to never get or limit our possibility of getting close to the 0.5 inches per second. And then again, we'll also have a photographic survey of the existing conditions and a video survey of the exterior prior to start of construction to verify that no damage has occurred. Next. This is an elevation indicating the locations of all of our monitoring. The orange dots indicating where survey prisms would be installed. We would install them both at the second floor and near the top of the merchant house to gather a full picture of any displacements. Biaxial tilt meter would be located near the top of the building, and our vibration monitors would be located in the basement at the areas adjacent to the excavation where the vibrations would tend to be highest. Next.
Yeah, I think that's our presentation, and we're open for questions.
Okay, thank you. For the committee questions, it would be a good order, I believe, if we dealt first with the design of the new building and then with the engineering questions. Committee comments on the design, please. Are there none?
Anita, can you unmute?
Yeah.
I
Yes,
I saw you
I'm
speaking.
here. To myself and my dog. Thank you. Well, let's see now. In some ways, I really think it's been improved. Specifically, the size of the windows. And can you hear me all right? I have this weird background noise. Everybody good? All right.
Yeah, loud and clear.
The areas that concern me are the enormity of the side elevation, which got substantially bigger, longer, with windows much lower down, sort of overpowering the old merchant's house. And the other comment I have is that while I understand this terracotta thin, and in many ways it's kind of very intriguing and interesting, I don't think it's used properly in the cornice. It's almost like you're using a material in one way and then you're pretending it's something else. So personally, I think the cornice is not there yet. It feels much too light and flimsy. But I do like the coloring of the whole building, which I think does go much better with our neighbor. And the size of the windows, I think, is a big improvement. So the side elevation, I think, is something that maybe other people want to talk about as well. Thank you.
Okay, others? Other committee members can unmute themselves and speak, I believe.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, Albert, please.
There's no indication, and I do not know what is at the rear of the merchant's house and the rest of that lot. The new structure extends all the way to the lot line to the north. But what is between the old merchant's house and the lot line?
Ooh, there's a wall and there's a garden in
There
the
is
back
a
of
ga-
the old merchant. Yeah,
There-
and a Victorian garden, a fancy garden they've been working on forever. Yeah.
There is a garden.
Yeah, it's a historic garden.
I've never seen that. And will this structure affect the garden?
It shouldn't affect the garden. The garden wall will be maintained. If we look quickly at sheet 15, Joe, can you turn to that one?
Yeah.
Basically on the right there, you can see that our building goes full depth on the first floor as a commercial entity, then has a terrace on top of that first floor. And the garden is off to the right there with its garden wall preserved.
Thank you.
Are there other committee comments on the design of the building? I would add.
Yes, this is Susan. I do have
Okay.
a question about the side facade there. Is there another image that we can see of that? Is there an
Perhaps
elevation?
the best thing to
slide
understand is
elevation?
the side facade. We do have that lot line diagram, which shows the comparison of ourselves to the previous scheme. And you can see that on the upper floors, we have actually fewer windows than the previous scheme, and we have added some lot line windows lower down at the back of the building as different from the previous scheme.
Thank you.
Susan, I believe this drawing satisfies your question, right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Are there other members of the committee? My comment would be, if we could go back to the facade,
Sure.
the front facade.
Perhaps we can get a.
But it just has to do with the parapet that, and perhaps it would be in another context, would say that it calls undue attention to itself. The building, as you explained, is a sort of amalgamation of design of really a loft building with referencing windows that are in some ways like punched windows. And this appears to be, and it's repeated, is it not on the ground level as a canopy? I thought I saw another.
There's a kind of cornice element at the lowest floor that is simply a piece of metal. So we don't apply the same terracotta.
I misunderstood what it was.
Horizontal.
Well, I'm speaking about the top, that it calls undue attention to itself and it's decorative. Those would be my comments on it. The one on I recall somewhere along the line, another picture that made the one at ground level look a bit heavy, though it's hard to tell in this.
Well,
what we're
you can
seeing now.
look at sheet number 11, Joe.
That's it.
Oh, that shows it better. Yeah. Again, it looks tacked on to the building rather than growing out of the building, probably because it splits the terracotta screen into. Okay, thank you. Now, are there comments from the committee on the with respect to the merchant's house, the engineering aspect of it?
Yeah, I have a question on that. If you could explain the benefits of a mat foundation. Is that actually suspended, that it would move independently of the sidewalls? Am I correct in that, or what is a mat foundation? Perhaps you could explain that to us.
The mat foundation, as opposed to individual spread footings, is that so a spread footing would deliver the column loads more locally to the soil, and could potentially would generally settle more. The purpose of the mat here is that you have a mat, like a doormat, I guess, right? That it occupies the full footprint of our site, and it's stiffer and delivers the loads of the new structure more uniformly to the soil to limit the settlement. So comparing what you would have as a conventional spread footing versus a mat, your settlements of the soil under our building would be much less. That's the purpose of using the mat foundation.
And in the cellar, is the cellar at the old merchant's house, the rubble wall, is it set in like that in the cellar floor plan? Is it a much narrower room? Yes?
Yes, this is the
All right.
accurate representation of the.
The rubble wall is set off from your building, I don't know, whatever that is, 10 feet, 8
Yeah.
feet, something like that.
Yes, I don't know the exact dimension off my hand, but this is a 2-scale section of the two properties.
It's also interesting to note in this diagram, and I think you see it in the existing photo of the one-story garage, that the green wall is currently in place. It's actually, I believe, on our property line, and it is an additional wall alongside the merchant's house, and it won't be touched in our construction. Is that right, Joe?
It's not being removed.
Right. So there's already some stabilization, in fact, in place currently.
And why is it they're two different heights? I thought that's what it was, but then in the drawing on page 19, on the left, on the west, it's one height, and on the east, it's another. Is that reality? Do you follow me?
Yep, I believe it is. I'm just trying to find an image of it quickly, see if I can see it or not. I'm afraid I don't have an image of it, but I think they just continued the wall all the way up to Merchant's house. Maybe it's a remnant of the old 4.5-story townhouse that was there previously. I'm not really sure. Joe, do you have any more information on that, Joe M?
Yeah, that green wall on the merchant house side is our wall. That's the wall that you actually see now currently, adjacent to the merchant house.
So it's a party wall.
No, it's
not really.
Not a party wall, because it's
Okay.
on our property.
But it doesn't go all the way up. You don't know. Does it go all the way up to the roof line of the old merchant's house? Or does it stop somewhere?
Yeah, so if we have a picture, you can see it. It does go up all the way to the roof.
Might be in one of the historic photographs. I'm not sure if it's.
Yeah, you won't see it there. You see a little bit of it on 2, but you really can't really spot it, I'm afraid.
My next question, I do have one more question. On the drawing page 20, we have the raised area foundation, which goes from the street to the back of the building, the old merchant's house building. And then what about the garden wall? Don't you think that's also built on rubble? Wouldn't we need to go all the way back? unless we undermine the wall that's there now.
Right, so we intend to excavate deeper adjacent to our wall in the rear yard. That is correct.
And what would prevent that from being damaged? I mean, it's the same, I'm sure it's just about the same construction as the house. You know, they would have built just the cheapest foundation there.
It's a similar foundation construction. Our concern with the house is that we're adjacent to the house. In the rear yard, we're not adjacent to the house. We're adjacent to a garden.
Thank you.
The merchant house does not have a wall on their side in the rear yard.
Oh, it's beyond their property line?
Correct. The green wall is on our property. We're leaving the wall in place. I believe there's ivy and plantings on the merchant house side, but right now it's the wall of our one-story garage building.
So that dirt from the garden touches the green wall in the garden.
Correct.
Okay. Are there other questions at all from the committee about the application?
Valerie had a question.
I had a question too. Okay.
Mine was, I was trying to raise my hand during the design portion, so I'll just make my comments very quick that I'm disappointed in the height and the disappointed in the metal cladding and the expression of the cornice in comparison to the context of where the building is. Thanks.
I had a question about the merchant's house flue, and you mentioned incorporating the flue within your building. Could you explain that a little bit to us, please?
So in the previous proposal and in this proposal, the thought is that we would take their flue, attach it along the sidewall of the flue and run it up inside our building to the top of our building. Joe, can you point out our two chimneys? And at the very top there.
Can you see my cursor? I'm not sure.
Right. Traditionally, I think one would have expected that the flues would have simply continued up on the merchant's house side of the property line, and then gone to the height that they needed to go for a legal chimney, and we would be responsible for that. But we think because the merchant's house is obviously a museum, we want to preserve its roofscape / chimneyscape, and so we were suggesting that we take those flues into our own building and run them up. And that's how we would deal with the requirement that we have to preserve existing working fireplaces.
Thank you.
Of course, fireplaces, wood-burning fireplaces currently are not allowed in the city.
Is that all for the committee of any sort of questions? Are there members of the board that wish to speak about the application? Then we're ready for the public comments. We'd like to do the following order. Village will speak first, and then Mr. Hiller, who is representing the merchant's house, will speak. And Mr. Hiller will extend your time to 5 minutes from the 2-minute limits for others, so that you can help to give a general view.
Mr. Hiller, Chenault, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Mr. Hiller actually had to run out to another meeting, so he'll be at the tail end. He'll tap us
okay.
when he's coming back in.
Then we'll do village, right? And then members of the public, raise your hand and promoted to being able to speak. And please ensure that you lower your own hand when you finish speaking. Otherwise, we get hands raised that have spoken, haven't spoken, and it becomes confusing to manage. Now, Sarah will speak again from Village Preservation about.
Well, our testimony again is going to be short but sweet. Obviously, the museum is a gem that's incredibly valuable to the neighborhood and to the city. And we are very concerned about the grave impact of the demolition of the building. Although the engineer certainly showed some impressive designs, but we're very concerned. We've seen that before, and unfortunately, it hasn't always led to the best result. So we're concerned about the demolition and new construction next door to this New York City landmark. Not just New York City, but also state and national. Thank you.
Okay, we have about 5 attendees that would like to talk. Teresa, you'll be first. Teresa?
Great. Yes, thank you. Hi, this is Teresa Utheralt, and I'm from the East 4th Street Block Association. I've lived in the neighborhood for over 20 years. First, wanted to just thank this committee at CB2 for your incredible diligence and thoughtful protection of our historic districts and our landmarks. I will also be brief. This is a project that has never had any community support, and that is because simply the Merchants House Museum will not survive even demolition. So in some ways, it's almost even moot to be looking at a new design. But that being said, astonishingly, even in the middle of a dystopian pandemic, we're looking at a proposal that would be massively increase the volume and surface area on the site, which obviously has grave implications for the neighboring property of the Merchants House. First, we talked about the garden. The garden will now be cast permanently in shade for most of the day. Those of you that are familiar with the neighborhood and with the Merchants House know that that garden is absolutely beautiful and one of the few places in the neighborhood where one can actually go and enjoy a beautiful Victorian garden. So we'll be forever marred by this construction. But more importantly, not only would the museum not survive demolition, by increasing the footprint, they increase the weight, and therefore the pressure on the building and the subsidence risk increases exponentially. So this building is far more dangerous than the previous one. At the end, we all know the Merchants House Museum is a triple landmark building, but I think what must be impressed upon people is that it belongs to the city of New York, and it is our job collectively to protect it. It was the first landmark property when the LPC first got started. It is the meta landmark. If we cannot protect this landmark, then there's no point in having protections for anything. 9,000 people signed a petition against this project, and this project is worse than the one that came before. Who knows what this will really be? You know, I know developers love to play this game of bait and switch. Is it a hotel? Is it a commercial property? Is it condos? Let's face it, guys, we're living at a time of incredible vacancy. We haven't seen vacancy rates in New York at this level.
Would you confine yourself to the presentation, please, rather than speculation?
Well, what I'm trying to say, actually, it's not speculation. What I'm trying to say, actually, is that there is no need for this building in this community at this time. We have record vacancy levels. Why would we sacrifice our most treasured landmark to build a building that the community does not need and even makes no economic sense? I think, you know, the developer has other options that are far more interesting economically and do not place the Merchants House Museum in danger. And we should send a resounding no to encourage them to do the right thing and actually transfer these air rights to their adjacent property on Lafayette, where they can develop a more economically valid architectural building. Thank you.
May I ask, do we have the ability to display the clock?
A site plan or plot plan?
Carter, or
we do not, Chenault, we do not. At the
moment. Okay.
Should I let the next person speak?
Yeah, if you can.
So the next person is David Patrick. Again, just to remind you, everyone has 2 minutes to speak, and please lower your hand after the after you present. So 2 minutes. Thank you. David, you're up.
Why, thank you. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Very good. I would just like to make a couple of points. One is that saying that the window plan on this new design evokes the residential past. If you could bring up number 17 again. The residential past, oh, I'm sorry, I have the wrong one. The residential past is 3 windows across. If you look at Merchant's House, this thing looks like they want to divide it down the middle at some future date to make some money, which is all very good and fine, but it's not, you're being sold a bill of goods if you're being told that this evokes the past. It doesn't. And the other is, well, as long as we're looking at number 17, I happen to live in one of those lower apartments in 25 East. And you look at the previous design, left me 2 out of my 5 windows. And now they're cutting me down to 1 out of my 5 windows. I realize this is not the place to argue about New York predatory real estate, but come on, guys. I'll lower my hand.
Thank you. John, you're next. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just did Nick Nicholson.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all of you on the community board for having this and for having us all here to talk about this project. My name is Nick Nicholson, and I've been the director of the board of the Merchant's House Museum for almost 18 years. And I'm really pleased to be here simply to remind the community board that the prior proposal was rejected both by the community board and the city council because the work necessary to construct the proposed building could possibly cause collapse to the Merchant's House, but more importantly, were landmarked both inside and out. And any kind of shifting to the building next door can result in damage to our interior landmark plaster, which is irreplaceable. Most importantly, the current proposal is substantially the same as the prior proposal. And in fact, the construction methods that were discussed by the architect are identical to the previous proposal, except that this building is slightly larger and it's got an increased height and bulk and poses an even greater risk. Even if the Merchant's House can somehow survive the construction of this newly proposed building, we can't avoid irreversible damage to the landmarked interior of this building. Our plasterwork is irreplaceable, our interior details are irreplaceable, our flooring is irreplaceable, our front and rear facades are irreplaceable. And I strongly urge the committee to please set this aside and not allow this building next door to be torn down. That's the beginning. Once that building is down, there's nothing we can do. Thank you for your time. And I'd also like to point out that the Merchant's House Museum director, Pi Gardner, can't raise her hand, but would like to speak.
Sure. Let's just get through some of the other public members. Let's see. Nick, if you don't mind lowering your hand. John Krawchuk, you're allowed to speak.
Great. Hello. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for having me actually this evening. I'd like to thank the members of the committee and the board for all of your work and for allowing us an opportunity to speak today about the Merchant's House. My name is John Krawchuk, and I'm the executive director of the Historic House Trust of New York City. We're a nonprofit 501c3 organization that works in partnership with NYC Parks. And our mission is to advocate for, promote, and provide expertise to 23 publicly owned houses that are within the city across the 5 boroughs. I'm hearing quite a bit of background noise. Would you be able to accept, please? Hello?
Yeah, is that better? I think.
Oh yes, that is. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you so much. Anyway, I'd like to comment on the proposal before you today for 27 East 4th Street. And also to remind you that as part of the Historic House Trust membership collection, the Merchants House is one of those houses that, again, is publicly owned. I know that that was previously mentioned on this call. And I'd like to implore the community board to defer their action on this project until certain omissions have been studied, including in the applicant's proposal that there are specific details for how the house will be fully protected that are omitted. I'd like to offer some immediate specific concerns, however, in my testimony today, and really encourage you to carefully consider this proposal and to allow it to be studied because of the magnitude of what is before you today and the impacts on the Merchants House Museum. The Historic House Trust has identified a few significant exclusions from this presentation. The first one are the flues, which I know have now been added, but they were not originally in the presentation that was posted on the website or discussed. And nor has there been any discussion with the New York City Parks Department, who technically has the jurisdiction of the building as a city-owned building, as to any sort of discussion about whether the chimneys could be vented on an adjacent property. That's something that really requires a very thorough discussion and study because of the very serious impacts to the house to allow the mechanical equipment in the basement to be vented. This is not a working fireplace issue. This is actually active live mechanical equipment that is in the basement that services the house that needs to be properly vented according to the DOB code. In order to address that, especially with the magnitude of the proposed project, it really requires very serious study and no doubt will have very serious implications for the house. Secondly, I'd like to talk about the incomplete visibility study. The Department of Environmental Protection and NYC Parks, as you may know, has entered into an agreement to turn the DEP lot on the east side of the house into a public park. It already is under the jurisdiction of the Parks Department. And as you probably know, because you've seen the plans, there is a proposal at hand to develop that as public parkland. That has not been addressed in this proposal. And again, it is scheduled to provide barrier-free access to the house and to be a wonderful public amenity when it is constructed. It's currently in procurement. The design is completed, and we hope to see that work begin very soon. There's over $1 million that's been allocated to improve that lot as a public park. The applicant's proposal does not show any visibility studies for how the proposed construction of this building will impact the house and the gardens and the public park that will be on the east side of this structure. So anyway, I implore you again to take a close look at this, and we feel that mock-ups should certainly be produced to demonstrate the scale and massing, and that it should remain up, of course, until the Landmarks Commission has a chance to also take a look at it. I know this is something your committee has a lot of experience with. And then lastly, a shadow study. This was mentioned the last time round with this application for the previous building, and that the applicant has really not provided at all a clear light study for how the proposed building will impact the Merchants House and the adjacent DEP lot, which is proposed to be converted to a park. The increased height of the building and the street wall could adversely affect the garden, and which relies on sunlight, and we'd like to have a full shadow and sunlight study to really understand the impacts.
All good points, John. Time is sort of running out here. You want to just wrap up, please?
Yes, and lastly, we just want to ultimately make sure, as has been noted previously, that the house is safeguarded. We feel great concern. We've had no consultation on this. From the developer, we've had no outreach. This is our first opportunity to comment. We do want to make sure that the house, this very fragile house, is safeguarded, both the exterior and the very fragile interiors. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Margaret Gardner?
Yes.
Gardner?
Right.
Yes,
I'm here.
please. All right.
Sorry, one moment. I want to address something that was said, and it may come up again, and we've had it before, is the question of our basically deferring this meeting or the decision at the meeting. We are obliged by the Landmarks Commission schedule of hearings. And at present, the reason it's before us tonight is because there will presumably be a landmarks hearing prior to the next time that we will be able to submit testimony and a resolution. And therefore, the correct address for deferment is through the commission, not to us. And if indeed we were to adjourn this meeting, as it were, or adjourn, unable to comment at all. Thank you.
Okay, Margaret, you're up.
I'm Pi Gardner, and it's my good fortune to be director of the Merchants House Museum for going on to 30 years now. There are a lot of issues against approving this project, but I'm going to talk about one that I don't think anybody really thinks about much. Because the Merchants House is a museum in the public domain and it is bound by its mission and the public trust to preserve and protect its original collection and 1832 landmark building. I'd like to address what the museum will need to do if construction, God forbid, does move forward. First, there's the packing, removal, and storage of the original Treadwell collection of 3,000 items. The cost for that will be $1,750,000. Once the collection is off-site, we'll be able to undertake absolutely necessary measures to protect the building's landmark interior, including erecting padding, scaffolding to secure and cushion the interior plaster walls, ceilings, and decorative elements on all 4 floors and in each room. That'll be $1 million. But before shovels can go in the ground, repairs to our 188-year-old fragile building are essential. Repairs deemed hazardous and critical are estimated to cost $1.5 million. The total for all existing conditions is an estimated $1.8 million. Finally, moving the collection off-site will necessitate closing the museum to the public and renting temporary offices for museum operations. That means lost revenue and rental expenses of $800,000. These protective measures are essential and will cost approximately $5 million, money we do not have. I'll end by reminding you of what the community board stated in its resolution in May 2018, when it unanimously denied the first application. To quote, "The Merchants House is an entirely unique, enormously treasured, fragile, and irreplaceable landmark and museum. The kicker here is that it is irreplaceable. Yet here we are again, facing a new application for a building that appears to be even more massive, thus making the risk of irreparable damage, as predicted by the many engineering studies undertaken, even higher." Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Giorgio Bavenzi?
Sorry.
Thank you. My name is Giorgio Bavenzi. Good evening, all, and I'm a member of the East 4th Street Block Association. The proposed building is out of scale in my view and would dwarf the beautiful landmark that is the Merchants House. But the worst part is that it is a construction that we know puts the Merchants House at risk. And additionally, I also need to point out that there is litigation initiated by the owner of the lot that purports to be, that is the applicant here, with respect to his prior development proposal that is still pending. And so this proposal, today's proposal, cannot be really entertained until the prior proposal and the litigation that was brought by the owner himself are resolved. So the project from 8 years ago, as we know, was for a building that had 1 less floor, but a structure substantially smaller in volume and mass than the building presented today. And that earlier proposal was already out of scale. The design was not appropriate for the NoHo Historic District, and more importantly, was found to endanger the safety of the neighboring Merchants House. CB2 rejected that proposal. City Council eventually rejected it as well. Today's proposed building is more than 1/3 bigger in footprint and mass than the prior one. And it defies common sense, I think, to think that it can be built safely and without raising even more concerning issues than those raised against the prior project. Structural analysis that were conducted in connection with the previous proposal, again, for a smaller building, showed that the construction of that building would create an unbearable threat for the Merchants House, meaning that this landmark would certainly sustain damage and likely collapse. An irreplaceable gem gone. So I would also note that the neighboring building, 25 East 4th, also historical protected building, has 39 windows on its east wall, and most of them date back to the building's original construction date in 1898. Those windows can be seen on page 4 of the presentation in the two historical photographs, one dated 1931 and the other 1940. And they were typical of the loft buildings built during that period. They're an inherent part of the building's protective feature, therefore. And on this basis, I would also submit that any new construction should not cover any of those original windows on the 25 East 4th Street. So on this basis, I urge the commission to reject the proposal, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Could we have Ms. Gardner back for a moment? I need to clarify something about her presentation. Margaret Gardner.
Yeah, no, sorry.
Okay.
That's on me. Hold on. Allow. Okay, Margaret, are you there?
I unmuted. Yes, I am here.
Hi. I want to get down your testimony accurately. I'm not quite a court stenographer. There was the point of protect the structure and the what I described as structural decorations within. What was your next point after that?
Let's see. That was we had to do repairs to the house. We had a conditions assessment done in 2018 by Jan Herd Pokorny Associates, our preservation architects, and they repairs deemed hazardous and critical were estimated to cost 1.5 million, and the total was 1.8 million. Can you hear me?
And the 800, yeah, and the 800 million was a total for what you estimate your cost would be.
The total
relative to this stuff is 800, right?
800,000 for lost revenue and having to rent space for museum operations. The total for all of these protective measures is $5 million.
I'm sorry, I didn't scroll down. I was conflating two things. So 5 million is the bottom line for all that you've mentioned before. Okay, yes. Thank you very much. Carry on, please, with the.
Okay. The next speaker is Jason Zakai.
Hi, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, yeah.
Hi, Jason Zakai. I'm an attorney from Hiller PC. I'll be brief. Michael Hiller is going to speak more thoroughly on our objections. We represent the Merchants House Museum. I just want to stress one thing regarding the pending litigation from an attorney's perspective, that the developer, that litigation is still ongoing, where the developer sued to vacate the rejection of the proposal by this board and by the city council. It seems that the developer wants 2 bites at the apple. The developer could win in that litigation, and this whole proposal would be moot. The developer has not stated any intention to abandon that litigation. And in fact, last we heard the developer had requested a court hearing on the case. So I just think that's very important to keep in mind going forward. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Okay, Meg Lynch, floor is yours.
Hi there. I just want to thank you for the opportunity, echoing the other guests who've spoken already. My comment, aside from being very much opposed to this project, is that it is incredibly remarkable that there are monitors and all sorts of monitoring devices discussed, monitoring systems to alert you. However, the developer did not express any plans as to what would occur should these monitors or monitoring systems go off. And I think that's pretty alarming, and it alarms me and should alarm you as well. Thank you again.
Meg, is the question, do you want the architect and engineer to respond? What happens when the alarms go off?
If they have a response, but I'm confused as to why that, if there is a monitoring system, a plan, if those alarms go off, why they would not have been included in the presentation initially. If there is a plan, I would love to hear it.
Okay, Joes, do you have a response?
So if there is an action plan, if the monitoring systems go off, the work that's causing the vibration or the movement ceases, and action is taken to mitigate those issues.
Okay. Okay, up next, we'll have Susan's second fire. Susan? All right, when she figures out what's going on. Helena?
Yes, hi. My name is Helena. Thank you to the committee for your attention, hard work, research, and dedication. I am a member of the East 4th Street Block Association. I'm a mother of 2 young children, and we all love the Merchants House as an invaluable historic building, providing a magical and educational window into a single-family home in the early 19th century. It is a gem, and to think that a towering building would most certainly cause irreparable damage is heartbreaking to imagine for our future generations. We should always move to protect and support these treasured landmarks, especially as unique as the Merchants House. I object to this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Susan's second fire. You there? Okay, Alexis, you're up.
Hi there. I just wanted to say that I, like many of you, I'm in awe of the work that the committee does, and the board of the museum, and just the entire staff. It's just an incredible place. I've been in New York City for over 10 years, and every time I bring any friends or family to the museum, people are just totally blown away by the magic of it. And it really is just this special place. And I think it's pretty ironic that in talking about the facade from a visual perspective, you talk about recalling the history of the street in the neighborhood and tapping into that. However, this construction will ultimately negatively impact a fully intact, fully preserved building that actually is historic. So if the intention is to preserve the history and recall the history of New York during that time period, then this is the perfect moment to protect that space. And ultimately, as everyone has touched upon, it can never be replaced, and it would be absolutely heartbreaking. And I just speak as a local New Yorker. The reason why people love New York and the spaces is because of the history and the charm. And quite frankly, another modern construction that would potentially sit vacant again is not going to bring back that magic. And so I really urge the company to think about what this means and the implications of that for the building and for future generations to be able to understand what New York was like, and to really have the most invaluable experience possible when visiting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Chandra?
Hi, thank you again for inviting public comment at this meeting. And like many of my fellow members of the East 4th Street Block Association, I love the Merchants House, and I use that garden. It's beautiful. It's such a respite, and what a treasure. And if we can flip back in the presentation to the slide that showed the terrace that's planned for the back of the building. So we spoke about, or others have mentioned on this call, the concern about sort of the shadow that might be cast on the garden and which will be detrimental to the plantings there, which have been very thoughtful. I believe the gardener of the Merchant's House is really great at what he does. But the concern I have is this patio, which is, my guess is, if I'm guessing correctly for what the use is going to be of this building, I would have a lot of concern as to what's going to happen in that patio and the noise pollution and sort of vibe pollution, call it if you might, to the peacefulness of the garden next door. So I don't want to repeat a lot of what other people have said, but I just want to point that aspect of the plans that have me a little concerned. Thank you.
No, thank you. Up next is Jeffrey Meltzer. I'm sorry, Metzler.
Okay. Hi, yes, I'll be very brief. Sorry about the echo there. And just voice my opposition to the proposal. I'm also a member of the East 4th Street Block Association, and just also want to point out for the board's, I guess, background information. I have personally engaged in conversations with the owner of the property to try to work out some alternative solutions, and involving as well the city council member's office, and they really just have not shown any interest or flexibility or willingness to discuss alternative proposals that would involve shifting air rights to the other property that they own on Lafayette, and coming up with a development that would be more in keeping with the overall neighborhood. And so I just think that that's helpful context that the board should be aware of, because I know that came up at the last when they were proposing it the last time. There was some mention from the board, a recommendation that there be discussions with the developer about alternative proposals, because I respect the fact that they own the property and want to do something with it. And I just want to say that we've had conversations with them, and really they have not been interested in engaging in those.
Okay, well, thanks for letting us know. We've one more, Roberta. You're on mute, Roberta.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Roberta Bolovich, and I would first like to thank you all for listening and for being here and for giving us this information. I'm a volunteer at the Merchant's House Museum, and up until 2 months ago, I was the visitor services coordinator. And I'm wondering why we're doing this again. We've already followed this whole process, and as others have said, it was already denied by both your committee and the city council. And from my perspective as visitor services coordinator, not only would this do irretrievable damage to the physical structure, as has been pointed out much better than I could possibly do, but it would do, it's not just the city of New York. It's, of course, the community, which has spoken. It is the city of New York, which owns the building and to which we give tremendous value. And it's also the world. I have seen people from every single continent on Earth, except for Antarctica, come to that museum. And I'm sure of that because I was the admissions person and they came in to see me. And in more normal times, we were doing upwards of 16,000 visitors a year. That's a very good number for a historic house museum. It's an incredibly important place. This will do, no matter what happens, there will be damage. That has been established. And there's nothing that can be replaced. You can remake something, but it's not the same thing. So that's really the concern that I have, that I believe everybody has, but I just had to speak, and I very much thank you for listening. And I strongly urge you and respectfully urge you to vote against this. It's an outrage.
Vaughn?
Hi, that's me.
Hey.
Thank you very much, everybody, for your time. I guess probably a lot of you aren't aware of my surname. It's Treadwell. I've come a long way to the US and I've ended up living on 4th Street. What I would say very emotionally is that the house is a complete gem. If you lose it, it's gone. I don't think there's any need for construction next door. And I think that New York will lose a massive part of its history if it's damaged by throwing up this building that nobody needs.
Okay. Thank you, Vaughn Treadwell. I think, okay, that's it. Oh, yep.
Okay, we'll ask Mr. Is Mr. Hiller back?
No, Mr. Hiller is not, but we just have one more hand raise here. Elizabeth.
Okay.
Elizabeth, you have 2 minutes.
Hello, I've been a guide at the Merchant's House for about 4 or 5 years, and I must tell you about a boy who lives in the neighborhood who's 8 years old, whose mother finally got a membership because that boy knows the house so intimately. It's so fascinating to him. I often lead school groups through the house, and I can't tell you what it does, how it expands their horizons to be in a place that was actually lived in by a family. This is an absolutely irreplaceable educational tool we have here. And to threaten it with this anonymous building just chills me to the bone. So on behalf of that 8-year-old boy, one of my favorite students to guide through, please turn down this proposal. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Elizabeth. We have one more hand raised, Michael Harmon.
Okay, and then we'll.
And then Michael Hiller. And then Michael Hiller. He's ready.
Okay.
Oh, thank you, but it's actually Michelle Herman.
Ah.
I'm female.
Oh, no. Well, no, Michelle, but then there's Michael. Oh, forgive me. By all means, the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate you taking my my moment here. I'm actually a travel writer, and I cover New York City quite a bit for outlets across the country and outside of the US. And a lot of people that come to the city, they want to see the history. And the Merchant House Museum, as you know, is probably one of the, if not the last original structures still standing that predates the Civil War. You know, there are other buildings kind of from the mid to late 19th century in the city, but they're now all commercial, they're now repurposed. This is probably the last link to that era in our city's history. And I've had friends that have come and worked with the museum to promote it, and some of them who are the most tech savvy people I know are blown away by, you know, what took place, you know, 2 centuries ago. So I really ask you to really please keep in mind, you know, the legacy that the house has, and, you know, if in fact that this new proposal can cause some permanent damage that, you know, as others have said, is not easily replaceable. And I thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, well, it looks like we have one person. Lower hand. Why don't we just let this? Oh, Michael Hiller. Oh. Okay, so Michael Hiller, you're up.
Okay. First of all, thank you all for giving me the opportunity to address you and for dealing with our scheduling issue this evening. So let me begin by saying that you heard exactly what I was hoping to establish in the time that I have, specifically that the foundation and structural design that were rejected in 2018 by the City Council, by the Manhattan Borough President, and by the Community Board, this Community Board, is exactly the same as what is being proposed today. Why was it rejected in 2018? It was rejected in 2018 by CB2, Manhattan Borough President, Brewer, and City Council, because all of those parties were provided reports and testimony from several of the most eminent preservation design professionals and engineers and architects in the city of New York. And despite what you heard, they told quite a different story and provided quite a far more detailed analysis than you heard tonight. I'll give you just a couple of examples. You heard that the foundation settlement would be at most 1/8 of an inch. Well, the design professionals who specialize in historic preservation of buildings like the Merchant's House have confirmed that it would be 4 times that much foundation settlement. Why? Because it's on a rubble foundation. Merchant's House on a rubble foundation. Directly adjacent to that is soft soil, silt, and clay. When you put a building on that, it's not going to just depress the ground beneath it by 1/8 of an inch. It's going to depress it by at least 1/2 an inch. And that was when the plan was much different than it is now in terms of height and bulk. You were told tonight that the height of the building would be roughly the same as previously proposed. That's just not true. The height of this building will be 94.5 feet, plus a 20-foot elevator bulkhead. The previous building, from the plans that I looked at just before I began to speak, showed 85 feet. The bulk of the building is also much more substantial. This is a much heavier building. Why is all of that important? Because the Merchant's House Museum, being situated on a rubble foundation, does not have the stability that ordinary buildings have. So, for example, when you heard that the standard for vibration would be acceptable because it would be less than is necessary to meet DOB requirements, that's for generic regular buildings. We're not talking about a regular building. We're talking about a building that was constructed in 1832 and is sitting on a pile of rubble. So you cannot afford it. When you hear about monitoring, let's be clear about what monitoring means. It means that when the building vibrates, when Merchant's House vibrates, there will be a monitor that will show it. Why is that a problem? Because Merchant's House cannot vibrate. It cannot vibrate 1/2 an inch a second. If it were to happen, as confirmed by preservation architect Hirschberg, as confirmed by Justin Spivey of WJE Engineers, as confirmed by Michael Devonshire, who's a member of the Landmarks Preservation Commission and one of the foremost and eminent preservation architects in the city, what would happen is the interior of Merchant's House would crack. There's original plaster, 1832 plaster. It cannot absorb that level of vibration. So you add that to the fact that there's going to be substantial depression next door, which is going to pull the Merchant's House down. And you're talking about massive damage. How massive? There is testimony that if the building that was planned previously, which is lighter and shorter, if that were to be constructed, Merchant's House could collapse. It could suffer either a partial or a total structural collapse. In addition, irrespective of whether or not that happened, it's not a question of probability. It's a certainty that the 1832 plaster would crack and break, and that interior structures on the inside of Merchant's House would similarly be damaged. Why is that significant? Well, the Merchant's House is a 19th century tableau. It is what life was in 1832. If you haven't been to the Merchant's House, I promise you it's worth the visit once COVID is over. Everything is original. Everything is original except for the desks for the offices on the top floor. So if anything breaks, if anything is broken, it's irreplaceable.
Michael, you there? I think we just lost him. Okay, we don't have any more presenters.
Okay,
I'm sorry,
we'll carry on, and we'll carry on with our business session. And if Mr. Hiller comes back, we'll
yeah, but we don't have any more.
This application consideration.
Okay, no, we don't have any other hand raised. So
okay,
just want to say, everyone from the public,
if you keep an eye out for him,
okay,
then we'll go on.
Just want to say thank you, everybody.
Okay, we'll begin the business session now. I remind you that this is the only people who are to speak at a business session are the members of the committee. And before we cut off, are there any members of the board here who wish to speak before we begin the session on any of the applications?
Hey, I just have a question. I'm terribly sorry. What did we decide? Should I demote the architects?
Anyone who's not on the committee, right, and not a host.
Okay.
I saw something, Mr. Hiller's name flash up. Is he back?
Let's see. No. Michael Hiller.
Mr. Hiller, if you're back, send a chat saying so. Okay. All right. We'll carry on. If he comes back, we'll finish whatever he had to say. It's clearly technical. If members of the committee will first, is there any comment?
I'm going to interrupt for a moment. Sorry to be so rude, but I understand that Mr. Hiller is trying to get back on.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. He's not showing up as an attendee. Yeah. Is he a panelist?
He's back now.
Oh, okay. Talking permitted. Yeah. Go, Michael. Hey.
Thank you so much. So they would have to put interior columns throughout the entire interior of the merchant's house. What would they have to do in order to make that happen? They would have to remove the entire, I'm sure you heard this from Pi Gardner, they would have to take out the entire collection from merchant's house, hire a preservation warehouse storage expert, take all of the materials out, close the building while the work is going on. All these materials would be placed elsewhere. The entire staff of Merchant's House would have to be placed elsewhere. The city of New York and all the people who view the Merchant's House and enjoy its exhibit and its collection would be deprived of that opportunity. And all because the neighbor wants to put in an oversized, overbulked building next door. I would just like quickly to close, and if anyone has any questions, I am glad to answer with the following point. For those of you on the committee who are thinking, well, the Department of Buildings or the Landmarks Preservation Commission will come in and save the day, let me assure you that is not going to happen, because the Department of Buildings and the Landmarks Preservation Commission blew it last time. The Landmarks Preservation Commission said that the DOB should look at it. It was beyond the LPC's jurisdiction. The DOB blew it. And that's confirmed by the fact that the city council rejected the plan as unsafe to Merchant's House. In fact, it's specifically in the city council's opinion. And it's a problem, I can tell you, as a preservation lawyer, and I do this every day, that is happening all over the city. I'll give you one quick example. At the Frick Museum, there's something called the Music Room, which is the last salon space left in New York City. We went to the BSA, and the BSA was required under the State Environmental Quality Review Act to determine whether or not a National Historic Landmark like the Frick would be adversely affected, including the Music Room. What happened was they deferred to the LPC. The LPC referred to SHPO, and SHPO said it was beyond its jurisdiction. So constantly what we're having is historic buildings at risk because people are waiting for someone else to do it. I would urge you, as the body that led the charge in 2018 and got it right first, to make the same decision you made back then, with the same foundation and structural plan that failed before city council being brought back to you now. I would urge you to reject the plan. If anybody has any questions, I'm glad to answer, but thank you so much again for accommodating me and giving me the time.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Hiller, we addressed earlier the fact that we can't make a postponement and still have a voice. I think you understand that. It came up perhaps while you were away, but thank you for that comment on your letter. Hello?
Yes, no.
Oh, okay. Then we'll start the, let me just get back. Do any, no one from the board wanted to speak? That's where we left off. Okay, so we're just the committee now. The first is the building on 13th Street, 50 West 13th. Our normal course is we send a letter signed by the chair and the chair of the committee in support of such things. And we heard no reason not to do that. I'm sorry, I never said for the record, the 61 7th Avenue South and 14 Gay Street were both laid over. That was said in the notice of the meeting. Briefly sum it up is that the brick and the bluestone, most of it is thought to need replacing, and that elements, a fair number of elements of the cast stone can be preserved, and everything that's not preserved will be matching the color and the texture of the materials. Any other comments on?
Why is it coming before us? I mean, it's a restoration project that got a little bit bigger. Do you know?
Of the entire facade. It is before us. I didn't make the decision. Okay.
No objection.
No objection.
Approve.
Okay, 27 East 4th Street. And I have made even more extensive notes than usual on it. And I would invite, I think everyone's sort of had their comments made. So could we, dealing with the design itself, and the merchant's house for the moment, say what we would like to have included in the resolution itself about the building, the design.
Well, I'll say something. I think to get into the specifics of I'll call it a thin design, the terracotta, I think that needs to be developed more because of the way it's used in many different conditions. And I just think aesthetically and architecturally, particularly at the cornice, that it should be revised and made more substantial and not use one material inconsistently. It's a screen, and sometimes it has metal behind it, sometimes it has a window, and then finally you're looking through it up to the sky. So that, I don't know if anybody else agrees with me, but that's the weakest part of the facade design from my point of view.
Can I just ask, it feels like we're putting the cart in the wrong place.
Yes.
I'm going to vote no because this should not happen. So why would we address the particular materials or the design? I think the only thing to address about the building is its size and inappropriateness and the fact that it's going to destroy the building next to it.
Okay, so, we're dealing with the design now. If you don't want to say anything about the design, there'll be a time to discuss everything. But it's the design now.
Why should
I just wanted to add a little bit on to what Anita said, that it's substantial and without historic reference.
I agree. I agree with Anita, but I don't know why we should waste time and space in the resolution devoted to the design.
It will make it a stronger resolution.
Does anybody know what the landmarks, is Sarah still here? Does she know what how the commission justified approval of the previous proposal?
That was before my time. And so I'm afraid I don't. I will say that I was, so my committee hasn't dealt with, look, I'm in my glasses, obviously it's late at night. So my committee hasn't dealt with the design yet, but we are very concerned about the fragility of obviously the merchant's house. next door to it. And as far as the design goes, again, we need to still review that. But the review of the previous design, from what I understand, weren't there issues with the zoning? Like they went above the zoning and that was why it went. Do I remember that correctly?
I can't recall a zoning thing. But the thing that's most in my mind about the design and how it's different is the material and the color.
Well, and also it's pushed back quite a bit, no?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
It stepped back. It could do more, but yes, one floor step back.
We really we need to deal with what we have. We know about the previous, but another thing that came up is the window pattern.
Yes.
As relating to nothing historic.
If that's the focus of these particular comments right now, then I would say that it's very troubling that we're dealing with a building that seems to be, as of right, that they have now complied with the zoning requirements. The lawsuit, or I should say the suit against the city that the developer filed on the previous hotel was because hotels aren't allowed on the site. An office building is allowed on the site, and so this now seems to comply with the zoning regulations. And so, and certainly there's historic reference to the materials of the facade. I think they've done a good job on that. They have punched windows, they've got brick surrounds. The terracotta decoration, I will call it, that's kind of quirky, and I don't particularly like the application of the terracotta, including the cornice. But as far as the bulk and the size and so forth, that has to do with property rights. And so if I'm just looking at the design itself, I would say that the way they've divided up the window bays and the symmetry and floor to floor is repetitive. That is very much a reference to all the historic buildings in the neighborhood. And so, that's my comment on that particular aspect. But again, I'm very troubled by having to deal with that as opposed to the real elephant in the room, and that is this.
Okay, we're coming to the other. I just want to say, anybody.
Before we get to the elephant, which really is the most important piece here, I think we should also talk for a moment about the side facade and what that looks like and how disappointing an effect that has on the Merchants House Museum, a visual effect. I mean, it's this looming mass with what?
Well, and what I was saying before was it wasn't, I meant the mass going depth, like the depth of it, from what I understand. Again, I wasn't here in 2014, but my understanding is that has expanded quite a bit, no?
Yes.
Yes. So that's troubling in terms of the fragility of the structure, garden wall, all of that behind to the east of it. That's where our concerns right now lie. Again, we haven't, my committee hasn't reviewed the whole design yet, but that's certainly our biggest concern is the building, obviously the Merchants House Museum.
My note related to this is that the surface area of the east facade overpowers the merchant house as viewed from any reasonable angle.
Exactly.
In addition to the structural impact.
Yeah.
Okay, may we move on to the engineering? We
Okay,
don't
so-
need to do a detailed structural analysis. It's what does it do to the house, I think is where we best
Yeah,
concentrate.
from what I saw, this is very similar to what we're dealing with for where the building I'm living in, where there's construction next door. The engineers have taken every possible precaution and every engineering device that they know of to protect the adjacent foundation. There's not too many different ways that you can build next to an old building and still try to protect that foundation and that structure that's adjacent. So I think that they have, just on that aspect, again, I'm being very limited here in my scope. In my estimation, the engineers have done everything that they can think of to do the best they can to protect the adjacent structure, including all the monitoring, all of the engineering devices that will be implemented.
Others?
To Brian's point, I would just like to say or add that any kind, I think we're all concerned about these sort of alarm systems. I mean, the damage has already occurred potentially when the alarm goes off. It's not like you can't unring the bell at that point of whatever problem has occurred. And I think that this all becomes a question of, a scenario where, what's acceptable risk? In some situations, one might say that there's an acceptable amount of risk. I think when we're dealing with this treasure, no risk is an acceptable amount of risk.
And from the legal and technical, not
You're frozen.
landmark, which affords an extra protection. And we have been very particular, and previously the commission has been very particular about individual landmarks.
Well, and let me just add to that, the fact that the merchant house has hired these preservation architects and engineers to give us a report on what would happen to the merchant house, no matter what kind of building and construction would be done next door. They documented that when the buildings on the east side of the merchant house were demolished in 1988, there was substantial damage done. And so sort of have a history of no matter what you do, you're going to have some damage. And they made that report very clear about any new construction at 27 East 4th.
Other comments?
I
Yeah,
want
go
to sort of second what Susan Gammy said. I recently had major construction right adjacent to my building, and these monitors, they work only when you've done something terrible, and the building starts leaning one way or the other, so the signal comes after the damage is done. And that's sort of, in this particular situation, it's obviously not acceptable to even rely on that kind of technology, to tell you, oops, you've rattled the windows and the doors. Yeah, and I also think that any construction that these guys are proposing is, we have the testimony of experts who are saying it's going to collapse, it's going to destroy plaster, it's going to destroy, items within the building. It's also going to mandate that, everybody clear out for as long as the construction takes place, that they hire offices, and just the preservation work within the structure and the cost of that, assuming it could protect the building enough. It's just, you know,
We're in a much stronger position with our recommendations if we address is this building.
Huh?
If the feeling is that this building should be denied because it adversely impacts a building that has all the virtues we've heard about and is an individual landmark, then that's the basis for recommending denial.
I don't know. Just one minute thing. I don't know that this design is any safer, provides any more of a guarantee than the first design. It looks huge. It got bigger here and a little smaller there, but it's mass.
In that case, we would affirm our previous position.
Right.
That we would deny that this building.
There's no improvement
that
from
this
the
building
first.
does the same thing a prior building would have done.
Right.
I just reviewed the previous resolution and, you know, it substantially holds.
I think it's very important that the major difference here appears to be that the old proposal was for a hotel. So Landmark simply passed the buck to the Department of Buildings regarding usage and zoning and so forth. So I think we have a better opportunity to get Landmarks to deny it with a very strong resolution.
I totally agree with what you're all saying. I just think to illustrate, I actually did my undergraduate thesis on the old Merchant's House. I ate, slept, and dreamt it it almost killed me. So, I mean, I really know this building. But one of the things I find the most significant and the most fragile and very rarely complete is the plasterwork. The ornamental plasterwork is bar none, top of the line with recessed medallions, very elaborate. And they can't take any vibration. They simply break. That's the nature of plaster. So it's unusually sensitive in that particular arena. Other buildings could take some movement, seal it up and you're good to go. This is damaging one of the most precious architectural interior features of the house.
Oh, and it is interior landmark as well as exterior, is that the case?
Yes.
I think that's important to point out, you know, remind the commission that it's both interior and exterior landmarked, which makes it so unique.
Yes, I had that down to begin with. I was just checking that I was correct. Are there other members of the committee that want to say something new?
I just had, I guess, a quick question or comment. I mean, I wasn't around for the original proposal, but is this fully covering the entire lot now? Is it going all the way through?
No, there's a big back. They showed it. There's a big backyard. Someone complained that it would impact the garden because of.
No, the construction looks like it's going all the way through.
The new building goes almost. Yes, it does. It absolutely does. It goes all the way until I think 5 feet to the back of the lot.
Yeah, because they built that little whatever space in the back that's a few floors high, right?
But not to the
I'm
full
just looking
height,
at page
right?
15.
A patio for the restaurant.
Yeah, the patio. That's it. Yeah.
That will be on the ground floor.
It's 127 foot deep at its deepest. And then I guess there's some, Yeah, it's long and
I-
narrow.
Okay, then
I-
what do we say about that?
Is that even allowed by current zoning?
I'm sorry. What?
Yes, it's.
That's
it's
just part of
all-
the impact. Is
it's
that
all
what
per
you're
zoning
saying?
code. It does comply with the zoning code. The backyard can be 1 story up. That's just the way the zoning is. That's still
That counts
considered
as open.
in backyard. By
Oh,
so it's
Within certain districts, not residential, obviously, but for commercial,
yeah.
in Soho, you have the same condition. It's a commercial application.
Right. So
Right.
that's not a contentious point for this. And actually, one other point that was brought up and that I noticed was that there wasn't time for a shadows study to be done and so forth. But since the sun would only create a shadow on the Merchant House and the other garden and adjacent park, when it's on the west side of the Merchant House. Let's see, number 20, what is it? Number 25? No, or 20.
Mhm.
Yeah, number 25 is even bigger than this proposal. So the shadows are already there from that building on the west side. And for that matter, this big side wall is already there, which is visible when you look at the Merchant House. It's those sorts of effects are really not changed very much. And so I don't, to me, those aren't that's not the real crux of the problem. And that's why we have to, I think, personally, we have to focus on the fragility of the Merchant House.
Chenault, I wanted to say something too. You know, when you get into this age of a building, it's almost like it's a living, breathing building because everything is integrated into each other. You know, we heard earlier the architect was discussing the brick, right? You know, old brick. I mean, this is an old building where everything is old. All the fabric is all there, and it all interconnects. And, you know, I think that what Anita was pointing out about the plasterwork, you know, the plaster is connected to the lathe, which is connected to the beams, which is connected to the side of the building, which is connected, you know, to the roof, which, you know, everything's connected. And, you know, you push and pull in any single spot, and you know, have the opportunity to destroy some other elements of the building without even realizing it. And
I'm glad you said my name before you said that, because just today I was looking into a ceiling where we're having some work done. My house was built in the same year, so it's the same lathing. We don't boast of decorative plaster, but in fact, 2 rooms have the original plaster.
So, and I think it's important to point that out because, you know, the goal here from somebody trying to argue against this, that all these parts are disconnected, when in fact they're all connected, and that's the uniqueness of, you know, these types of landmarks.
Can I point out just one thing? I noticed that, I mean, I think they were saying, one of the points that was brought up earlier was that the zoning was holding this back from being, I mean, I think the last time it was rejected or looked at by landmarks, but I noticed this property is actually on the draft scope that the City Planning Commission put out. This is actually lot J on their list of potential sites. So it's under potential rezoning.
And if I may say, since Carter just pointed out the interconnection between the interior and the exterior, since it's an interior landmark, doesn't that all tie together?
Yes.
My dog just scratched me. I need a tissue. Hold on.
Maybe the new chair of the Landmarks Commission will listen.
So far, I have that the building is worthy of protection and its landmarked interior and exterior, and we have not been assured, and then the interconnection should go. And then after that, I have the proposal doesn't doesn't prevent sufficient assurance or something to that effect that the work would not do irreparable harm to the building. We're working up, I gather, to a denial. That's what all these things say.
Yes.
Say that intentional, that there's no guarantee that.
The wording I put was the proposal does not assure sufficient protection for the house and in particular the landmarked interior.
Maybe we should quote one of the presenters talking about how it can't be, how it's impossible to
Well, we don't need to quote. We can say this is all our recommendation, and that's what numerous people said, including us.
Right, but there was testimony that basically there's nothing you can do. If you go down this road, you
Right.
destroy this building.
And that's what Brian said and others on the committee. So we have it well testified to.
Okay, great.
Right. Another reason, this is simple. We don't feel like the house can survive the construction as presented. Whether it can survive any construction is also may or may not be the case.
And it probably can't survive financially either. I mean, even if it could in the perfect world, who's going to raise $5 million to encapsulate it?
Unless the sponsor has to provide that in the.
There you go.
I think it's very clear what we have to do. We can't gamble here. We're the Landmarks Committee. We can't, we're not gamblers on this.
Right.
It's not for us to gamble on the future of this building. The risk is simply too high.
Right.
Period.
And if we bring up something like the cost, then we're saying, well, if you're going to go ahead and do it, and in some cases where it's not so critical, we offer an alternative. If we disapprove of it, but if it's done, the windows should be 3 instead of 4 across or something. But we're not taking that view. The reason for some detail and not a great deal about the design is that surely if it's denied, they're going to come back again. They're not going to give up on it. So that we would have precluded this design as being something to be approved, even with a different construction that preserved the building. Something like not touching the garage and building around it, or.
Yeah, I think that it sort of brings to mind, what is the possibility for that neighboring property to the Merchant House? And I am convinced that the only way to protect the Merchant House is for the city to buy that lot and to preserve it either as the one-story garage or maybe as another garden or part of the park.
Brian, I was
Or a
having the
visitor
same
center.
I was having the same thought, Brian.
Sorry?
I was having the exact same thought because at some point something else is going to come back to us. And so that's a great point.
It would also be useful because it would protect the house in other ways by having the public maybe use it as an auditorium and then have smaller groups. So in fact, there's a need for more space.
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
We're going to recommend,
we're
going to recommend that as part of our resolution.
Yes.
No, it doesn't seem like that.
I don't think it's exactly in the landmarks
No,
Should we make
It's
any mention-
probably not even appropriate for the list. It's a splendid idea.
should we make any mention about the pending application that's under sort of litigation?
How can that help us?
I don't know.
Do
we need
It
to
seems
do that?
muddly to do that. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
My general
unless
thing
we
is to deal
delve
with what's before
deeper,
us.
Wait.
it's
What,
like
Anita?
third hand. I mean, unless we really want to do our research, I don't know if anybody does. Go ahead, Sandy, sorry.
No, I was saying, I wanted to hear what you were saying.
Oh, I just think it's something that we don't know firsthand. It would take too much research to go get into it, from my point of view.
And the other thing,
And I think we can probably assume that the Merchants House attorney, Michael Hiller, will really be able to speak to that point in a knowledgeable and compelling way.
Right.
plus the other thing is that from that hotel application from years ago, everybody gave it a denial. I mean, we did, and the city council did, and so if they bring the hotel idea back for any reason, there's already denials, and so that's kind of like water under the bridge, isn't it?
Right.
I'd like to suggest this to address that a prior application for a similar building with similar engineering was denied, was recommended for denial by.
You froze.
Yeah, I don't hear you. I can't hear you.
That along an additional thing, that the prior application was recommended for denial by the committee, and the city council denied it.
Yeah. Doesn't hurt to point that out.
And it's in a very broad sense, it's the same application.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Most particularly the engineering is modified in a minor way, but not sufficient to make it, to assure us that the Merchants House won't fall down or be ruined.
But it should not be the same resolution.
No, that
From years ago.
That one is a bit much. But what we're dealing with is, in a very broad sense, the same application, not resolution.
Yep.
I think the design thing can be consolidated a bit. I just want to review once more the engineering and Merchant House. An individual exterior, interior worthy of preservation. The interconnected paragraph. The proposal does not assure sufficient protection for the house and in particular, and the landmark, not in particular. Original. Interior. And they there are other key details.
I think the
We can
garden
go on about the
wall.
monitoring or not. The
garden wall. The garden wall. There's
Is
no
an aesthetic or an engineering.
well, it's an engineering, but it's not our wall. It's the neighbor's property. But there's no protection to undermining or to underpin the existing garden wall. And I don't know. It seems like something that they should protect since it's been part of that house. In other words, the angle of repose, which they call it, what is it, area of influence? I love these terms. So
Yeah.
the area of influence is only the length of the old party wall.
Could
And
we
it stops.
sorry, could we say the existing wall bordering the garden to keep it clear that it's not a wall that belongs to the garden?
Yeah.
You follow?
It's a garden wall. Right now it's a actually, I don't even, on the other side, it's a 1-story for much of it. Garage, so, yeah, whatever you want to call it. I think everybody knows what it is.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. In the interest of the economy, are there any other specific points that need to be made in the
the chimneys, I think it's worth mentioning. This is not for a fireplace. This is actually for mechanical. So I don't know if you're going up, 100 feet is good or bad, but it's a long way for a little house.
That's where the phrase "no assurance" comes from. Is useful.
That's right. So that's. I mean, I don't even know if it needs to go that high. The equipment these days doesn't quite burn the same way. But anyway, that's a concern. That needs to be vetted.
I think that's the restaurant again.
No, the chimneys are ours, meaning ours. All right, I did belong to the old merchant's house. I have to confess.
Yeah.
But I'm a free agent. No, it's the old merchant's house chimneys that are being extended to the top.
Yes.
There's no restaurant.
And
right?
the question is, can the added height serve properly the necessary ventilation that they provide now?
The mechanical
in order to
engineering.
preserve the landmark house. Are there other points? If not, we could have done it. I'll consolidate the notes that we made about the building itself, as much to put the emphasis on this as no more comments.
I would like to thank Mo. He did a really good job.
Shucks. Thanks, Albert. Thank Valerie.
Thank you all.
Realize it's not easy shuffling these people around. Valerie,
tell me.
have not been expressing gratitude to Valerie. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, really.
Good job, Mo.
Is everyone in order for Monday night? Did you hear that the meeting's at 7:30, not 6:30?
7:30 Monday. Yeah.
And
it's
everyone
still
get,
just the one
everyone
item.
everyone got the proposal, right?
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
still just the one item.
Yes. And
Got
it will remain that because the time has passed to
That's a very, very big and important item.
It truly is, Albert. I've already reviewed it, and I'm personally appalled. But okay.
Until we got the thing today, I pictured a bridge was a bridge, like a bridge across a highway that you walk to get to the Stuyvesant High School. And it turned out to be something quite different.
Indeed, yes.
It looks like again, the committee hasn't reviewed it. This is just but it looks like the building is being swallowed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I measured in my garden after the distance to see where that wall of bridge would come, and might as well not have black windows.
Right. I know. Okay, so we'll see each other Monday.
Right.
Good night, all.
Tend to your dog bite. Okay. Thank you all.
She's a puppy. She's a puppy. She's only 2 months old.
Mustafa, I sent you an email.
I saw.
Oh.
Let me sort of
okay.
What I can do.
Thank you, Maestro of the speakers. I suspect we'll have a number on Monday, but I'm certainly glad we have a separate meeting after this.
Yeah.
Thank you all and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Right, yeah.
Donald.
Thank you.
Right.